As the world prepares to mark the second anniversary of Vladimir Putin's full-scale invasion of Ukraine tomorrow, Canada, the United States, and the UK have announced new sanctions against Russia. As you heard there from U.S. President Joe Biden, the Americans are imposing more than 500 sanctions on Russia in response to both the war and the death of opposition leader Alexei Navalny a week ago today. Canada is also slapping new sanctions on 10 individuals and 153 Russian entities. Russia's ambassador to Canada calls the move a, quote, act of empty symbolism, according to Russian media. Well, those sanctions were announced. U.S. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer and 4 other Democratic senators traveled to Ukraine today to meet with President Volodymyr Zelensky. There is still a standoff in Washington over billions of dollars in military aid. The package is worth $60 billion and is currently stuck in the House of Representatives. Zelensky is urging U.S. Congress to approve the funding, saying failure to do so will cost Ukrainian lives. And tomorrow's anniversary is being marked with solemn ceremonies right around the world. Today, Zelensky was joined by the Danish Prime Minister, where they paid tribute to fallen Ukrainian soldiers at a cemetery in Lviv. According to the United Nations, more than 30,000 civilians in Ukraine have either been killed or wounded. Earlier today, we spoke with Ukraine's ambassador to Canada, Yuliya Kovaliv. Ambassador Kovaliv, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me today.
Now, today, Canada, the United Kingdom, and the U.S. announced additional sanctions against 10 individuals and 153 entities that support the Russian military. There's also an export ban on goods to Russia from Canada that could have been used to make weapons. What's your reaction to these sanctions?
We highly welcome that decision to impose additional sanctions, especially those which are linked to the military sector, because we have a lot of witnesses that the weapons that Russia has been using continue to have Western spare parts, including Canadians, in those weapons. And while we are fighting and keep fighting for our country, and we are very grateful for the military support to Canada, to US, UK, and the other partners, it is important to deprive Russia from their ability to produce weapons. Mm-hmm. And the sanctions, including for those companies and ban for providing this spare part that can be used in producing weapons, is an important further step to decrease Russian ability to continue the war.
Yeah, and we know that these sanctions do take time to really take effect and have an impact. Do you think that countries need to ramp up these sanctions, as it's now nearly 2 years since the war was unleashed by Vladimir Putin and the Russian military, and it seems like they are undeterred and, in a sense, unaffected by them so far?
I think that's not exactly correct. The sanctions indeed take time to have the result. But as we go back for these 2 years and look on the sanctions that have been imposed on Russia and the consequences that Russia is facing, I think the aviation sector is one of those. We can see definitely that because of the sanctions, Russia is not able to maintain, and Russian companies are not able to maintain their, by the way, a lot of stolen from the Western companies, their planes. So they have lack of capability to continue the flights, and the industry is decreasing. The same comes to the military. Mm-hmm. As we are seeing a lot of Russian Shahed drones, missiles destroyed, we see many of the Western spare parts. It gives us, on the one side, sense that Russia cannot use other than Western technologies in their weapons, so the industry is quite poor. On the other side, that gives us an important call to impose more sanctions, and what is also more important is to be very strict on those who try to circumvent the sanctions. So that's deprive totally Russia from the ability to continue producing their weapons.
Yeah, and with all due respect, though, this has been a tough week for your country. Not only are we marking the second-year anniversary of the war, but the eastern city of Avdiivka was also taken by Russian forces. So with that in mind, you know, on the sanctions and on the ability to stop Russia, it would seem like they continue to march forward. But how do you rate morale within Ukraine right now with the week that we've seen there?
I think we need all to understand the fact that any of the day of delay of the promised military support, whether it's artillery shells, whether it's the air defense, whether it's the armored vehicles or another military packages from our partners, of course, it has the consequences on the battlefield. Now, we need a lot of more artillery shells because there are particular parts of the front that Russia is significantly prevailing in their ability and access to the artillery shells. And of course, like on the other side, as we see in Ukraine, morale is high. Morale is high, but if you also ask the soldiers who are on the battlefield, they are as motivated as they were in the first days of the war, but they need more weapons. So they just cannot spend the cold days and nights in the trenches waiting for the weapons to be delivered to Ukraine. The biggest support for the motivation of Ukrainian soldiers is providing them more weapons so they can use them, they can advance, they can further protect our cities and liberate them.
Yeah, and to your point, we're hearing that there are reports the Ukrainian military is having to ration rounds. Is there anything that you've been able to push the Canadian government on to help on that front with ammunition?
We are working with the government, with our partners, including with Canadian government, and we are delivering message that we need artillery shells, we need air defense, we need armored vehicles, and of course there is also the shortage of production. The thing what we started to talk back in November 2022. That it's not only, we need today not only to talk about the stockpile of the artillery, which is running lower, but we need altogether to ramp up production. We are doing it in Ukraine. We significantly increased our ability to produce artillery shells, but I think we altogether need to work with the defense industry and increase the production in all the ways possible.
So has Canada been open to that, and why hasn't there been more progress on that?
We hope that we are working towards this progress, and we hope that there will be more support for us in terms of the artillery shells.
I wanted to ask you, because there's this massive aid package worth $60 billion that continues to be held up in the U.S. House of Representatives. What are you and your fellow ambassador in the U.S. doing to lobby American politicians to make sure that that money does get to Ukraine?
I think like my colleague in U.S., our members of the parliament, our government, Ukrainians, and all of the partners, the European partners are delivering the message how important it is to further continue to provide support for Ukraine. And I think we need to understand that it's not only for the Ukraine, it's for the interest of all of democracies, all the countries who are NATO members, because today Ukraine is protecting NATO border. Today, Ukrainian soldiers are between Russian troops, Russian invaders, and NATO borders. So we are fighting and we are today protecting NATO countries from Russia, from Russian barbarism, from Russian ability to, we are standing between today in the NATO. We are protecting. And of course, Russia is also the neighbor to many other countries who are now NATO members. And Russia is actually a neighbor to Canada through Arctics. And it's important that the fight which is Ukraine fighting today, it's important for us to be able to defeat Russia. So Russia won and forever will learn this lesson that it cannot, rewrite the borders of the sovereign countries.
Despite that argument, though, there are recent public opinion surveys here in Canada that have shown support for the war in Ukraine has slipped. Does that worry you at all? And are you concerned that support, not only in Canada, but around the world as we mark this second anniversary, that there is this fatigue about the war?
The word fatigue is of, it's a very complicated word. You cannot come to the mother who lost her son on the battlefield saying it's fatigue. You cannot say to soldiers who are there today fighting saying that fatigue. You cannot say to those parents who lost their children because of Russian bombing saying that it's fatigue. And we need to work with this fatigue. We need to overcome it because it's important for all of us to realize that it is something that have the impact for each of us. It's not only for us Ukrainians. That has already, for these 2 years, we all saw the impact of Russian war to each of us, whether it was the food prices that caused the inflation, whether it was the energy shortage in the Europe, whether it was the cyber attacks, whether it's the hybrid war with Russian disinformation. So we all are feeling this, and we all need to stop it for the sake of us, for the sake of our generation, and for the sake of all of us to continue to build the rule-based order.
Ukrainian Ambassador to Canada, Yuliya Kovaliv, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today. We appreciate this.
Thank you.